Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to NoDQ&A video right here on NoDQ.com and the YouTube channel. We are now just 2 weeks away from Wrestlemania, I believe. Is it 2 weeks or 3 weeks? I'm not sure, but we're getting close. We're almost there. We're halfway through March. We're halfway there, living on a prayer, hoping Raw will be good heading into WrestleMania. I actually thought Raw was a good show this week, and I will be discussing Raw and your other topics. So let's get started today with the first one, which comes from David. Do you think that this is all part of a story now and Seth Rollins is cleared to go at Mania? Because if so, why did Triple H go for his bad knee, SMH? Stephanie McMahon Helmsley? I always think of that. I remember her t-shirt with SMH, but now everyone uses that for shaking my head. But it was originally Stephanie's acronym. Anyways, to answer your question, right now it appears that Seth Rollins is still not 100% for WrestleMania. Everything is up in the air regarding if he'll be able to do a match with Triple H. Apparently, he has been cleared to do a limited amount of physical activity, and that's why we saw the angle on Raw with Triple H taking out Seth Rollins. But apparently, he has not been cleared to do a full-length match yet. I think that there's a decent chance we will see the match at WrestleMania. The fact that he was in there taking physical punishment from Triple H, even though it's a work, I think that's a good sign that he will be cleared in time for WrestleMania. I'm sure hoping that's the case, and even if he's not, I'm sure they can work around it, and I'm sure we'll see some kind of physical altercation between the two of them at WrestleMania. Will they work a full-length match going 100% out there? That's still a question mark, but if Goldberg can go out there and somehow do a 2-minute match, I'm sure Triple H and Seth Rollins can do something at WrestleMania that will be satisfying to the fans. They might have to be really careful with Rollins, but I'm sure we'll still get to see some sort of conclusion to this Triple H Seth Rollins storyline, with Seth Rollins getting the best of Triple H. But at this point, nothing is 100% set in stone, to answer your question. And real quick before I get to the next question, I really enjoyed the angle on Raw. Now, I know some people have been critical about Triple H beating down Rollins. Some feel it would have been better if Triple H had just tucked his tail between his legs, or as Seth Rollins would say, tuck his leg between his legs. Some feel it would have been better if Rollins was standing tall at the end of Raw, and then on next week's show, Triple H would have done that big beatdown. The thing that I do like about what they did on Raw is I think it makes more sense to have Triple H do the beatdown now rather than next week, because if they do it next week, then there's less time for Rollins to recover, and I think that it would be harder to suspend disbelief. I think by doing it now, Rollins has more recovery time heading into WrestleMania, and I think it's a little bit more believable to do it now, and there's more time for Rollins to sell the beatdown. I mean, either way, I think the beatdown angle was great. I think it was very effective in getting heat on Triple H and really garnering more sympathy for Seth Rollins. I thought the angle was really well done. Yeah, maybe it would have been better if it was done next week and having this 1 week for Seth Rollins to stand tall. But, with the timing, it just didn't work out. There's only a couple weeks left now until WrestleMania, so I think that what they did was fine. And I think as long as in the end Rollins gets the best of Triple H, I think it'll be fine. I think people are quick to judgment to say that Rollins is getting buried, and some people saying Triple H should have the crutch photoshopped with a shovel. I've seen those comments on Twitter, and I think it's really quick to say that Rollins got buried on Raw. I think you have to look at what the end result is. This one comes from Robert. How long will Alberto El Patron's reign as TNA champion keep TNA afloat? This question was clearly sent in before the video was released on Impact Wrestling's YouTube channel. It is official. El Patron has vacated the TNA title. He has given it up because he's a babyface and he refuses to accept the title in controversial fashion. Whatever. I think the whole storyline is pretty lame. And whether El Patron is the TNA, or excuse me, the Impact Wrestling World Champion, they still haven't changed the belt yet. It still says TNA on it. Whether he's champion or not, it's not going to make a difference. I've said this before. I've said this many times actually. I do not feel that there is any one guy that can turn things around in TNA/Impact Wrestling. And by the way, I'm going to keep calling it TNA because I'm not a fan of the IW acronym. Until they come up with something better, it's still TNA as far as I'm concerned. With TNA, I think that it doesn't matter who you bring in. You can bring in Alberto El Patron. You can bring in any free agent you want. That is not going to rebuild the brand and get people tuning in again. I'm not sure that there's anybody that could really move the needle, so to speak. I do not feel that there's anybody that could get people turning into TNA in droves. Not even somebody like The Rock. I think that TNA would somehow manage to screw up The Rock. Same thing with Steve Austin. CM Punk's another guy that I see people throwing his name around. I don't think CM Punk would move numbers for TNA. Maybe a little bit. Maybe 50,000 people, 100,000 people maybe. But beyond that, I don't think there's anybody that could make a real difference in TNA. What you have to do is rebuild the brand, and just being Impact Wrestling, not using the TNA acronym anymore, I don't think that's going to cut it. I don't think bringing in Bruce Pritchard and Zeb Coulter, a.k.a. Dutch Mantel, I don't think that's going to cut it. I don't think bringing in the GFW guys and Chris Masters is going to turn Impact Wrestling around and rebuild the brand. You have to come up with some new concepts and produce some compelling storylines. And I don't think referencing WWE 30 times in one show is the way to do it. That's just my opinion. Anyways, let's move on here. This one comes from Sean T. Flick. Should Hideo Itami get called up and be in the cruiserweight division? I think he should be called up pretty soon. He's been in NXT for a while, but at the same time, he's been injured. And I think he'll need to establish a track record in NXT, staying healthy until they fully invest in him on the main roster. But once he's ready to go and the time is right to call him up, that might be a suitable place for him in the cruiserweight division. He might get lost in the shuffle being part of the heavyweight division in WWE. You look at Austin Aries, he is shining right now in the cruiserweight division, and it seems to be a good spot for him right now. The thing about Aries is he's such a good promo that I think that if WWE wants to take him out of the cruiserweight division and put him with the heavyweights, Austin Aries is one of the few guys that could succeed because he's such a strong promo. With Itami, he's not there as far as the promos go, and I don't think he would do really well in the heavyweight division. Even somebody like Sami Zayn is a pretty strong promo compared to a lot of the cruiserweight guys, and that's why Sami can succeed with the heavyweights. But you have to be a very strong promo if you're going to be able to succeed and not get lost in the shuffle outside of the cruiserweight division. So with Itami, I do think it would be a good idea to put him in there with the cruiserweights. This one comes from Niam Nader. With Hideo Itami back, would you think he keeps and hits the GTS in NXT? What if he gets called up? Move change? I'm thinking there's a pretty good chance they'll make him change his finishing move. Because yeah, if he does the GTS on the main roster, I think that might encourage CM Punk chants, and we know how WWE feels. They are very negative towards CM Punk right now. They're negative towards the idea of drawing attention to CM Punk, and I think WWE will want to avoid the CM Punk chants at all costs. And they'll want to avoid doing anything that will remind fans of CM Punk. And even though Itami was doing the GTS first, the fact is people in the United States, in the WWE universe, associate the GTS with CM Punk. So as ironic as the whole thing is, I could definitely see WWE forcing Itami to change the move once he's on the main roster. This one comes from Andre. What do you think of the current direction of Ring of Honor with Christopher Daniels winning the world title? Again, I'm not that familiar with what's going on in Ring of Honor. I did see the match though, and I'm really happy for Christopher Daniels. He is somebody that I feel should have gotten the opportunity in WWE, but because of his age, it's looking like it's unlikely he'll ever get that shot. I'm glad that at least he's getting a run as the Ring of Honor World Champion, and it's looking like Adam Cole will be eventually phased out of Ring of Honor, and I could see him as one of the next guys that WWE signs. When you look at the potential list of people to get signed to NXT, I think Adam Cole has to be at the top of that list of guys that are on WWE's radar. And Adam Cole, I think a lot of people see him as a potential major superstar in WWE. So, I mean, it definitely seems like Cole is being phased out, and Daniels will be the Ring of Honor champion for a while now, and I'm very happy for him. I mean, Christopher Daniels is another one of those guys, along with Samoa Joe and Frankie Kazarian. Those guys, I've seen them on the indies going back to like 2000. I mean, I was still in high school when I saw Daniels, Joe, and Kazarian wrestle for the first time. I feel sad that both Daniels and Kazarian have not really gotten the opportunity in WWE. Kazarian had that brief run in 2005, but neither of them really got the chance to succeed like how we're seeing with Samoa Joe and Austin Aries and Bobby Roode and the guys that were former TNA stars that are now top stars in WWE. So to me it's a shame, and I think because of Daniels' age it's probably not going to happen. But at the same time, I am happy he's succeeding in Ring of Honor and he's getting a run as world champion. This one comes from Ravishing Raven. What did you think of JBL and Ron Simmons' run as the APA, and can you see Cesaro and Sheamus as the APA of this current era? I'm not sure why people are comparing Cesaro and Sheamus with the APA, just because there was that one segment 6 months ago where they were in a bar and they had a bar fight. To me, Sheamus and Cesaro are very different from the APA. JBL and Ron Simmons were buddies. They were beer drinking buddies. Cesaro and Sheamus are more of the odd couple. That's the storyline, that these are two guys that were never friends and they're unlikely allies, and they always argue, they always fight. With JBL and Ron Simmons, they had each other's backs. I mean, that's what the APA was all about. It was a brotherhood. I liked the act. I thought APA was a good act, and it made for some very entertaining segments when they were doing the protection storyline, and they were playing cards backstage, smoking cigars, and the fights would break out. It made for some entertaining segments on television. So it was good for what it was during the Attitude Era. Were they one of the greatest tag teams of all time? I think that's a bit of a stretch, but it did work for both of them. And let's face it, before the APA, Farouk was really going nowhere. They tried several things with him, and the initial team, the Acolytes, really was going nowhere. I mean, they were basically just Undertaker's minions, and you could throw a bunch of symbols on their chest, and they weren't really getting over. It wasn't until they started doing the protection gimmick and they became the APA that they really started to take off and make a difference in WWE. This one comes from Joshua. Did you like Vince Russo's on-air character in WCW? Why or why not? I liked the character in the sense that I thought Vince Russo was a good on-screen performer. He was a good promo. He was a good talker. The problem is, of course, Russo's constant insider references, and I think that that is what really made his character ineffective in WCW. I think as far as being a heel authority figure, I think Russo did a very solid job. I thought he was an overall solid performer. I just felt that the constant insider references made it basically a waste of time. Russo coming out there and, yeah, people were booing the guy, but then he would start making all these insider references, and it was making the casual fans very confused. And when they're confused, they end up turning out in droves, and that's what happened. People just lost interest in WCW. This one comes from BoyYouTooSlow. Hey Aaron, what were the plans for Triple H at WrestleMania 23? And this is a first-time asker. I believe the plan was for Triple H to be in the main event at WrestleMania. I think it was most likely going to be Triple H versus John Cena in a rematch from the previous year's WrestleMania 22. I guess there was a possibility of Shawn Michaels being added and a triple threat match taking place with Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and John Cena. You know, they ended up doing that in 2009, that triple threat match at Survivor Series. So I think it's possible we would have seen that triple threat match. But either way, I mean, the plan was for Triple H to be in the Raw main event. Undertaker was going to win the Royal Rumble and be in the SmackDown main event, and Triple H would have won the right to compete in the Raw main event, with possibly Shawn Michaels being added to the mix and making it a triple threat. This one comes from Nick Patterson. What lower tier guys could you see eventually going into the Hall of Fame from the main roster? Miz, Ziggler, Sheamus, Kingston? I think of all those guys you mentioned, I think the likelihood is that Miz will go into the Hall of Fame. I think Miz has had a stellar career. He also had a decent run, a decent length run as WWE champion. I definitely feel of all those names you mentioned, he is the most likely candidate for the Hall of Fame. Who knows? I mean, for all we know, all those guys could end up in the Hall of Fame. It's not like the Hall of Fame is this exclusive club where only the top names are being inducted. Again, you know, it's like a broken record. I say it every time, but, you know, I get these Hall of Fame questions all the time, so I really have to drive home this point that if Coco Beware can get in the Hall of Fame, anybody can get in the Hall of Fame. So if you ask me, if you're thinking about it, if you're thinking about, will Apollo Crews go into the Hall of Fame? Will so-and-so go into the Hall of Fame? Remember that I said, if Coco can go in, anybody can go in. So keep that in mind. Really, anybody is a possibility. If they're on good terms with WWE, there's always a chance that they'll go into the Hall of Fame. I think the biggest factor in not going into the Hall of Fame is being on bad terms with WWE. That will keep you away. But if you're on good terms with the company, doesn't matter if you were a main eventer, mid-carder, you were a celebrity that appeared one time, you got a shot at going in the Hall of Fame. This one comes from Daniel Lynch. Who had the better first world title reign, Kevin Owens or Dean Ambrose? That's a great question. I mean, Ambrose's reign was pretty short, and the match at Dolph Ziggler was basically a mid-card match for the WWE title. But with that being said, Kevin Owens was more or less a cowardly heel world champion and didn't do much. At least with Ambrose, he won that Shield triple threat match. He beat Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, and I think that match gave Ambrose some credibility. Unfortunately, there wasn't much of a follow-up, and at SummerSlam, he basically fizzled out as champion. But Owens never really got off the ground. I mean, he was basically a mid-carder holding the Universal title, and every match he was in, he won by fluke. And then, of course, he lost to Goldberg in 21 seconds. So I think I would go with Ambrose just because Ambrose won that Shield triple threat. But beyond that, I mean, neither guy really had a stellar run as world champion, quite frankly. This one comes from Boston Rules 15. Best WWE video packages ever. So he's asking me for my favorite WWE video packages. There have been so many of them over the years. I mean, that's one of the great things about WWE. They have a tremendous production team. To me, the greatest video package, one of the greatest, would be the My Sacrifice video from 2001. That one was great. And right around the same time, there were a couple really good ones around that period. The My Sacrifice, Triple H's return with the U2 Beautiful Day song, the Kid Rock song, Lonely Road of Faith, when they were bringing back the NWO. There were a lot of great ones. A lot of great tribute videos to wrestlers that have passed away. I really liked Randy Savage's promo. And there were so many great ones. I mean, to me the list is endless. But what do you guys think? Go ahead and leave a comment in the YouTube comment section. Your favorite WWE video package of all time. Which ones stood out the most to you? Go ahead and leave a comment with your thoughts. There are so many good ones I'm forgetting. I'm just thinking of the ones that are coming to the top of my head. This one comes from Dave Lesnar. Hey Aaron, what's the backstory with you and Jeff Meacham? When did you guys meet and when did you start NoDQ? Also, best wrestler interaction. Jeff was a fan of the site, and around 2001 he would start sending me recaps from WWE events. 2002, I remember he sent me a recap. He was at the Armageddon show at Staples Center. I was not at that one. He sent me a recap. So he was a regular correspondent, and what happened was in the fall of 2002, my friend Mike Nagel, some of you recognize his name, some of you remember him from XMV, he wanted to start a show on NoDQ.com, an audio show, and he basically was looking for a co-host, and Jeff responded to the inquiry, and that's how Extreme Mayhem, the audio show, first started on NoDQ.com. Back then it was the Mayhem.com. Originally it was WWFWCW.com back in 1998. Had some issues, legal issues with WWE, lost the domain, so it became the Mayhem.com, and then in 2003 it became NoDQ.com, and then Mike and Jeff started Extreme Mayhem Video, which was the video version of the audio show, and then Jeff started doing Talk Wrestling, and then I started doing NoDQ&A Video in 2011. So that's the short story of the evolution of the audio and video shows on NoDQ.com. As far as best wrestler interaction, I mean, in my personal opinion, Rob Van Dam. I mean, he was really nice to us. He granted us all these interviews. You know, we did the interview on XMV, and he even invited us to his friend's place in Hollywood for an interview, and then he did the interview with Jeff in 2014 when Jeff was relaunching Talk Wrestling on NoDQ. I mean, RVD was always really cool. Nothing bad to say about the guy. You know, very professional, and you know, he was always open to doing interviews and holding nothing back. You know, some wrestlers will be careful of what they say, but RVD, he says what's on his mind. He's very outspoken, and that made for some great interviews on NoDQ.com, and you can check out those interviews. They are archived, all the interviews, the XMV interviews, the Talk Wrestling interviews. They're all up on NoDQ's YouTube channel, so check them out if you haven't seen them. That'll wrap it up for this edition of NoDQ&A Video. Thanks as always for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please share it with a friend on Facebook or Twitter or any social media site. Anybody you know who watches wrestling, have them check out NoDQ&A Video, and I will see you guys next time.